out of my store, thief." Frank Dawson's fist slammed into Chayton's jaw, sending him stumbling into the dusty Montana street. The crowd at the general store jeered, their eyes cold with prejudice, as Chayton, a Cheyenne man, clutched the handcrafted necklace he'd meant to give Lena. Her soft gasp cut through the noise, but Dawson's bellow drowned her protest, threatening to fire her if she spoke up. Bloodied but unbowed, Chayton faced a cruel choice: leave town to shield Lena and his sick mother, Nita, or stay and fight, risking everything he held dear. Chayton, a 30-year-old Cheyenne veteran of the Great War, lived alone on Montana's high plains in 1930, his heroism forgotten because of his heritage. Each day, he tended to his frail mother, Nita, whose coughs echoed in their small cabin, while his heart ached for Lena, the white store clerk whose gentle smile lit his world. Their love was a dangerous secret, scorned by both Cheyenne and white communities, who saw it as a betrayal. Trapped by the town's bigotry, Chayton struggled to find work to pay for Nita's medicine, his spirit worn by rejection yet fierce with resolve to protect his family and land. The wind howled across the Montana plains as Chayton trudged toward his cabin, blood still trickling from his split lip. His jaw throbbed from Dawson's blow, but the sting of humiliation burned deeper, each step heavy with the memory of the crowd's jeers. He pushed open the creaky door, the faint glow of a lantern revealing Nita, his mother, hunched in her chair, her frail frame wrapped in a worn blanket. Her eyes, clouded with sickness, widened at his bruised face, and she reached out a trembling hand. "My son, what happened?" she whispered, her voice barely rising above the crackle of the fire. Chayton knelt beside her, forcing a smile to hide his shame, but his clenched fists betrayed his anger. He recounted the incident at the store, his voice low, each word laced with pain. Nita's thin fingers squeezed his, her words soft but firm. "You are Cheyenne. Hold your head high." Her strength, despite her weakness, warmed his heart, yet the weight of his helplessness lingered as he stoked the fire, vowing silently to protect her, no matter the cost. Morning broke with a harsh chill, and Chayton woke to the sound of Nita's ragged coughing, each gasp tearing at his heart. He rushed to her bedside, her face pale, her breathing labored, the blanket slipping from her shaking shoulders. He fetched water, pressing the cup to her lips, but her coughs only grew fiercer, staining her handkerchief with specks of blood. Panic gripped him as he realized her illness was worsening, the city doctor's fees looming like an impossible mountain. He rummaged through their sparse belongings, finding only a few coins, far too little for the journey or treatment. Sitting beside her, he held her hand, her skin cold against his calloused fingers, and whispered promises to find a way. Nita's eyes met his, filled with love but also fear, urging him not to lose hope. As he built up the fire to warm the cabin, Chayton's mind raced, torn between staying by her side and seeking work in a town that despised him, his desperation mounting with every labored breath she took. Under the cover of dusk, Chayton slipped to the edge of town, where Lena waited behind a cluster of pines, her face pale in the fading light. Her eyes, usually bright, were shadowed with guilt as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Chayton, I'm so sorry I couldn't stop him." He saw the fear in her, but also the warmth of her confession as she admitted her feelings, her words soft like a forbidden prayer. They stood close, the air thick with unspoken longing, yet she flinched at the rustle of leaves, terrified of being caught. Chayton's heart ached to hold her, but he kept his distance, knowing their love could spark violence. Lena clutched the necklace he'd given her, hidden under her scarf, and vowed to stand by him, though her voice wavered with dread of the town's wrath. As they parted, her whispered promise to meet again lingered in his ears, but the weight of their secret pressed heavily on Chayton, his hope tangled with fear as he vanished into the darkening plains. The next day, Chayton joined a gathering at the Cheyenne camp, the air thick with the scent of sage and tension. Sam, his young friend, approached first, his face earnest but stern, urging Chayton to stay away from Lena. "She's not one of us," Sam said, his voice low, echoing the murmurs of older Cheyenne men nearby. Their words stung, accusing him of betraying their heritage, their eyes heavy with judgment. Chayton's chest tightened, torn between his love for Lena and his loyalty to his people, the weight of their expectations pressing down. He defended his feelings, his voice rising, but saw doubt in Sam's eyes, though his friend promised to stand by him. As the meeting ended, an elder placed a hand on his shoulder, warning that pursuing Lena could divide the community. Chayton left the camp, his heart a battlefield of duty and desire, the plains stretching endlessly before him, offering no answers. By midweek, whispers of Dawson's lies slithered through the town like poison. Chayton felt the shift as he walked the market street, eyes narrowing at him, voices hushed but sharp. Thief. Dawson had branded him a criminal, his tale of Chayton stealing the necklace spreading fast, each retelling more vicious. At the blacksmith's, a man spat at his feet, warning him to stay away. Later, a rock crashed through the cabin's window, shattering the quiet, a scrawled note tied to it, "Leave or else." Chayton's blood boiled, his fists clenched, but Nita's weak voice called him back, pleading for peace. He boarded up the window, his anger simmering, each hammer strike a vow to fight back. That night he sat by the fire, the town's hatred closing in like a noose, yet his resolve hardened. He would not let Dawson's lies drive him from his home, his mother, or Lena. The sun burned high in the sky as Chayton walked toward the first ranch, his boots crunching on the cracked, dry ground. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but he wiped it away, determined to find work. At the gate, the rancher squinted at him, his lips curling into a frown, and barked, "We don't hire Indians," before turning away. Chayton's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to the next farm, where a woman peeked out, her eyes wide with fear, then slammed the door shut. At the third stop, a group of men lounged by a barn, smirking. One spat at his feet and laughed, "Crawl back to your tribe, Cheyenne." Each rejection stung like a whip, his pride crumbling, and as he trudged home, he pictured Nita, her thin frame, her raspy coughs needing medicine he couldn't buy. By dusk, he slumped against a tree, the vast plains stretching before him, his hope fading into a heavy, choking despair. Lena's boots echoed on the wooden floor as she stormed into Dawson's office, her heart hammering in her chest. She planted her hands on his desk, glaring at him, and demanded, "Why are you spreading lies about Chayton?" Dawson's face darkened, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward, the smell of whiskey sharp on his breath. "Mind your place, girl," he snarled, slamming a fist down, the thud making her flinch. He stood, towering over her, and hissed, "Keep away from that savage, or you're out of a job." Fear prickled her skin, but she caught a twitch in his Jawa sign. He was nervous, hiding something. She stepped back, her mind spinning with questions, and as she left, his cold stare burned into her back. That night, alone, her fear turned to fire. She'd dig up his secret, no matter the cost. Chayton rode his horse through the dawn mist, the cool air biting his cheeks, when he noticed something odd by the creek. A cluster of stones sat in a neat, unnatural pile, their edges smooth and worn. He slid off his horse, kneeling to touch them, his fingers tingling as if they held some old power. The pattern wasn't random, it felt like a sign, maybe from the Watcher, a name his people whispered about, a guardian of hidden truths. He scanned the horizon, the hairs on his neck rising, but saw only the quiet grass swaying. His pulse quickened, torn between awe and dread, wondering if this was a blessing or a curse. He mounted his horse again, leaving the stones behind, but their image stuck with him, a riddle he couldn't shake. Sam kicked open Chayton's door, grinning wide, a stack of furs draped over his arm like a prize. "We can sell these in town," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement, eyes bright with dreams. Chayton frowned, running a hand over the pelts, knowing the townsfolk would sneer and offer scraps because they were Cheyenne. Sam's smile faltered, but he pushed on, saying, "It's something, at least better than starving." Chayton's temper flared, his voice sharp as he argued, but Sam just stood there, stubborn and hopeful, refusing to back down. Finally, Chayton sighed, moved by his friend's faith, and nodded they'd try it. They worked all day, sorting the furs, Sam humming a tune while Chayton's thoughts drifted to Nita's frail hands, praying this might buy her medicine. Chayton jolted awake, the crash of a rock through his window shattering the silence, glass spraying across the floor. He scrambled up, heart racing, as angry voices pierced the night. "Get out, Redskin!" Outside, shadows darted, torches glowing like eyes in the dark, their shouts thick with venom. He grabbed his rifle, hands trembling but grip firm, and crept to the window, peering out at the mob circling his cabin. Nita whimpered behind him, her voice weak with fear, and he rushed to her, shielding her as another rock thudded against the wall. "Leave, or you're dead," they yelled, their words ice in his veins. He fired a shot into the air, the boom splitting the night, and the figures scattered, their curses fading. He sank down, clutching the rifle, Nita's shaky breaths beside him, the threat now a living shadow he couldn't ignore. Chayton sat by the flickering fire in his small cabin, the wooden walls creaking as the wind blew outside. Nita lay on a cot, wrapped in a faded blanket, her breathing shallow and weak. A single oil lamp cast a dim glow, showing the worry lines on Chayton's face. He rubbed his hands together, feeling the roughness of his palms, torn between staying and leaving. The townsfolk's threats echoed in his mind-angry voices, sharp words about their Cheyenne blood. Nita coughed, a harsh sound that made his chest tighten. He looked at the tiny pouch of coins on the table, just enough for a trip to the city doctor. With a heavy heart, he grabbed a scrap of paper and wrote, "Lena, I'll return for you. Stay safe." He handed it to old Sam next door, his voice low. "Give this to her." Then, lifting Nita gently, her thin frame cold against him, he stepped into the night, the wagon waiting. Fear and guilt battled inside him, but he whispered, "I'll be back." As the cabin faded into the darkness, the wagon rattled over the rocky path, its wheels groaning under the weight. Chayton gripped the reins, his knuckles white, as rain began to fall, soaking his hat and dripping down his neck. Nita huddled beside him, her gray hair plastered to her face, shivering despite the blanket he'd tucked around her. The horse stumbled in the mud, forcing Chayton to jump down and push, his boots squishing in the wet earth. "Keep going, son," Nita murmured, her voice faint but firm. She started a story how their Cheyenne ancestors crossed rivers in storms, their courage lighting the way. Chayton's arms ached, but her words fueled him. They stopped under a drooping tree, Nita sipping water from a dented canteen, her hands trembling. At night, the rain pounded their tarp shelter, and she whispered tales of warriors until he felt stronger. By morning, the city loomed ahead, a blurry hope through the mist, but Lena's absence weighed on him like the storm itself. In the city hospital, Chayton stood by Nita's bed, the white sheets crisp and clean beneath her. The doctor, a kind man with spectacles, pressed a stethoscope to her chest, nodding as he worked. "She'll improve with medicine," he said, offering a small smile. Nita's eyes fluttered open, a spark of life returning, and Chayton's heart lifted. He squeezed her hand, feeling its warmth. The room smelled of soap, a stark change from the damp trail. But then a nurse approached, holding a telegram, her face soft with pity. Chayton unfolded it, reading Sam's scrawl. "Dawson's after Lena. Worse now. Hurry." The paper shook in his hands, hope crashing into fear. He looked at Nita, peaceful at last, then out the window at the bustling city street. His jaw clenched. How could he be here, safe, while Lena faced danger? The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second a reminder of his split loyalties tearing him apart. Chayton slumped in a hard chair beside Nita's hospital bed, the air thick with the scent of disinfectant. Machines beeped steadily, their green lights blinking as Nita slept, her face calm for the first time in weeks. He held her hand, her skin softer now, and felt a flicker of gratitude. But his thoughts spiraled to Lena alone, threatened, needing him. He stared at the tiled floor, scuffed from countless footsteps, and questioned everything. Had leaving been a mistake? Could he have faced Dawson instead? The window showed a gray dawn, the city waking outside, but inside, guilt gnawed at him. He whispered to Nita, "I saved you. But what about her?" His voice broke, echoing in the quiet room. A nurse passed, her shoes squeaking, oblivious to his pain. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, torn between relief for Nita and the ache of failing Lena. The answer eluded him, heavy as the silence around him. Lena crouched behind a gnarled bush, the night air sharp against her skin. Her shawl fluttered as she watched Dawson's lantern sway, leading him to a deserted patch near Cheyenne land. She crept closer, her shoes silent on the dry grass, heart racing with every rustle. Dawson reached a weathered shack, his boots crunching gravel, and slipped inside. Through a splintered board, Lena saw him lift a trapdoor, disappearing below. Her breath caught. What was he hiding? She waited, the stars above cold and distant, until he climbed out, locking it tight, his face shadowed. She tested the door later, its rusty hinges unyielding, but the secret pulsed beneath. Dawson's nightly trips meant something big, something tied to his threats. Fear prickled her spine, yet resolve burned brighter. She melted back into the shadows, the shack's outline a promise of truth, knowing this could save Chayton if she didn't get caught first. Chayton rode into the dusty town as the sun dipped low, painting the sky a fiery orange. His horse's hooves thudded softly on the dirt road, the only sound breaking the evening stillness. He pulled the reins tight outside the saloon, his chest tight with determination, after seeing Nita stable in the hospital. As he scanned the dim street, Lena stepped out from a shadowy corner, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Dawson's more dangerous than you think," she whispered, grabbing his arm with shaky hands. Chayton's jaw clenched hard. He could still see Nita's weak smile, pushing him forward. "I'm not backing down," he said, his voice low and firm, brushing off her grip. Lena's breath hitched, but she nodded, her trust in him outweighing her terror. With a final glance at her worried face, he turned toward the general store, each step heavy, the air buzzing with the fight he knew was coming. The night was pitch black, no moon to light Chayton's path as he crouched low behind a jagged rock. Ahead, Dawson's lantern flickered like a ghost, swaying through the empty field. Chayton's breath puffed out in quiet bursts, the cold air stinging his face as he watched. Dawson stopped near some scruffy bushes, then dropped out of sight, like the ground had swallowed him whole. Chayton inched closer, his boots brushing silently over the brittle grass, until he saw it a trapdoor, cleverly hidden under dirt and twigs. His heart pounded loud in his ears, excitement mixing with dread as he realized what he'd found. But then, crack! A stick broke under his foot, the noise slicing through the silence. Dawson's head whipped around, his sharp eyes searching the dark, and Chayton froze, barely breathing, praying he wouldn't be seen. After a long, tense wait, Dawson slipped down into the hole, the door slamming shut, leaving Chayton alone with his racing thoughts. Sam knelt by the creek, the cool water splashing into his canteen as the afternoon sun beat down. Suddenly, a shadow stretched over him. Deputy Cole, his boots crunching loud on the gravel. "What are you doing out here, kid?" Cole's voice was rough, threatening, his badge flashing as he stepped closer. Sam's hands shook, spilling water over his fingers, his throat dry with panic. Just getting water," he mumbled, but Cole's eyes narrowed, dark with doubt. The deputy grabbed Sam's collar, yanking him up hard, and snarled, "Stay off that land or you'll regret it." Sam's legs wobbled, fear clawing at his chest, but he bit his lip, refusing to betray Chayton. Cole shoved him back to the ground, spitting angrily before turning away. Sam stayed there, trembling in the dirt, the deputy's words ringing in his head, but his loyalty burned stronger than his fear. Chayton moved through the dark, the night air thick with the sharp smell of sage and something risky. He found the trapdoor again, his fingers prying it open with a slow, creaky groan that set his nerves on edge. Down he went, the lantern in his hand throwing wild shadows on the damp tunnel walls. His boots sank slightly into the soft dirt floor, each step echoing faintly as he pushed deeper. At the tunnel's end, he shoved open a rough wooden door and stopped dead. Crates towered around him, packed with bottles of illegal whiskey, the sour smell hitting him like a punch. His hands shook as he touched one, the truth crashing over him. This was Dawson's dirty secret, a goldmine of crime. An owl's sharp cry outside jolted him back, and he scrambled out, heart racing, the weight of what he'd seen burning hot inside him. Chayton paced his small cabin, the fire popping and snapping in the corner as his mind churned. He saw it all now, Dawson and Mayor Gordon, scheming together, hiding their whiskey on Cheyenne land, pinning every crime on his people. The anger rose in him like a flood, his fists tightening until his knuckles went white. He remembered the raids, the hateful stares from the townsfolk, the lies that had torn his community apart. Gordon's fake smiles and Dawson's cold threats flashed in his mind, pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. He slammed his fist down on the table, the wood cracking under the force, his voice a raw growl. "They'll pay for this." Rage and purpose surged through him, clear as the firelight. Outside, the wind screamed through the trees, matching the storm building in his soul, ready to explode into action. Chayton stood frozen at the cliff's edge, the wind screaming past him, tugging at his clothes like desperate hands. The lantern in his grip flickered, its dim glow dancing wildly as it fought the darkness. Below, the town sprawled quietly, lights twinkling like stars, oblivious to the weight crushing his chest. Lena's face haunted him, her warm smile, the softness of her voice, now overshadowed by the danger he'd dragged her into. His ancestors' voices seemed to echo in the gusts, pleading with him to shield his Cheyenne people from ruin, but the secret he held, the hidden liquor, stash-burned in his mind. Revealing it could unleash Dawson's fury, a storm of violence that might swallow him and Lena whole. Silence, though, felt like a knife in his tribe's back, letting them bear the blame for a crime they didn't commit. His breath came fast, his heart thundering as he stared into the abyss. The cold stung his face, but a fierce resolve ignited inside him. With one last look at the horizon, he turned toward the town, ready to confront the chaos ahead. Chayton crouched by the riverbank, watching Sam toss stones that skipped across the water's surface, each ripple catching the fading sunlight. The air was cool, the grass soft beneath them, but Chayton's words came heavy as he spoke of the hidden cellar crates of illegal liquor piled high, a dark secret buried in the earth. Sam's eyes widened, sparkling with a mix of thrill and righteousness, and he leapt up, fists tight, We've got to tell the federal agents, he shouted, his voice cutting through the quiet. Chayton's gut twisted, his hand hesitating as he picked up a stone of his own. He pictured Deputy Cole's cold stare, the way the lawman's fingers always hovered near his revolver, ready to snuff out any threat. "Cole will bury us first," Chayton said, his tone low, the stone slipping from his hand into the river with a dull splash. Sam's excitement faded, his shoulders dropping, but a stubborn glint lingered in his eyes. They sat there, the water's gentle rush filling the silence, both wrestling with the danger they couldn't ignore. Chayton rode slowly through the early morning, the sky blushing pink as the sun peeked over the plains. His horse's hooves crunched on the dry ground, steady until he spotted it again, a odd stack of stones, 3 high, now by the twisted trunk of an old oak. He swung down from the saddle, his boots stirring dust, and knelt to study the pile, noticing how it pointed toward the tree's roots. His fingers grazed the rough bark, then dipped into a hollow, pulling out a crumpled scrap of paper. Scrawled in rough charcoal were the words, "The truth lies beneath the earth." His heart jolted, a rush of fear and wonder flooding his veins. He scanned the empty fields, the hairs on his neck prickling as if someone watched from afar. The watcher's riddle gnawed at him, promising answers yet piling on more questions. Tucking the note into his pocket, he mounted his horse again, his mind buzzing, the dawn light casting long shadows behind him. Lena's hands trembled as she struck a match, the tiny flame flaring to light the lantern in the cramped storeroom. Dust hung thick in the air, the scent of aged wood pressing against her as she steadied her breath. Then came the sound Dawson's boots thudding closer, each step a hammer blow to her nerves. The door groaned open, and his hulking shadow filled the frame, his eyes glinting with menace. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," he snarled, his voice rough, his whiskey-soaked breath hitting her face as he loomed nearer. He seized her arm, fingers digging in like claws, and slammed her against the wall, the jolt stealing her air. "Quit now, or you're done," he spat, his lips curling into a cruel sneer. Fear surged in her chest, but she thought of Chayton, of the fight they shared, and defiance flared within her. "I won't," she whispered, her voice firm despite the shaking. Dawson's glare sharpened, and he turned, locking the door with a heavy click, leaving her in the gloom, her courage glowing like the lantern's flame. Chayton slipped through the alley, the night wrapping around him, thick with the promise of rain. His pulse hammered in his ears as he neared the warehouse, its dark windows staring back like empty eyes. He pressed a hand to the side door, feeling it give under his touch, and eased inside, the creak of the floorboards loud in the stillness. Shadows stretched across the storeroom, crates towering like silent guards, but then he heard Lena's shallow breaths cutting through the dark. He found her, wrists bound to a chair, her face lighting up with hope as their eyes met. "Quick," she hissed, her gaze darting to the door as he drew his knife, slicing the ropes with swift, sure cuts. He pulled her up, their hands locking together, and they darted through the maze of boxes. But Dawson's voice roared from the darkness, "You'll pay," freezing the air. Chayton shoved Lena toward the exit, adrenaline surging, and they stumbled into the night, his curses echoing as they ran, the town shrinking behind them, freedom tasting sharp and sweet. Sam sat alone in his small room, the only light coming from a shaky lantern on his desk. He held a quill, his fingers trembling as he dipped it into the ink. His heart raced as he wrote a letter to the federal authorities, spilling the secret of the hidden liquor stash on Cheyenne land. Every word felt heavy, like it could change everything, and he kept glancing at the door, afraid someone might burst in. When he finished, he folded the letter tight, sealed it with wax, and slipped it into his coat, the paper pressing against his chest like a promise. The next day, He rode hard to town, dust kicking up behind him, and handed the letter to the post office clerk with a shaky smile. The clerk nodded, saying, "We'll get this to the right people, they'll look into it." Sam stepped outside, the sun warm on his face, and for once he felt a rush of hope, believing justice might finally come. Deputy Cole watched Sam leave the post office, his sharp eyes catching every nervous move. He smirked, leaning against the wall, already suspicious of the boy's secret. As Sam rode off, Cole marched inside, his boots loud on the wooden floor, and glared at the clerk. "Give me that letter," he snarled, his badge flashing as he leaned closer, his voice cold and hard. The clerk fumbled, scared, and handed it over, watching Cole rip it open without a second thought. Reading Sam's words, Cole's face twisted with anger, his fists crumpling the paper as he stuffed it into his pocket. That night, he found Sam in an alley, grabbing him by the collar and hissing, "You think you can snitch?" He threw a punch hard and fast, knocking Sam down, then kicked him again, destroying the evidence and leaving Sam bruised and gasping while Chayton's blood boiled at the news. Chayton and Lena huddled in his cabin, the fire crackling as they faced a tough choice. The air smelled of wood smoke, heavy with tension, as Chayton gripped the table, his voice low but firm. "We tell the Cheyenne about the liquor." Lena's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat, knowing Dawson and his men could turn violent. But she nodded, her hand reaching for his, her courage rising to match his own. They both felt the danger from the town. Threats to their lives, but the truth mattered more. Outside, the wind screamed, banging against the walls, like a warning they couldn't ignore. Chayton stood tall, his eyes fierce, saying, "It's a risk we take together." Lena squeezed his hand, her touch steady, and they walked out into the dark, ready to fight, their hearts pounding with fear and fire. Chayton faced the Cheyenne crowd, his voice clear as he told them about the liquor stash. The air buzzed with shock, people whispering, then shouting, their faces red with anger at the betrayal. He pointed to the land they loved, explaining how it was being used against them, and an elder stepped up, his deep voice promising to stand strong. Many nodded, fists clenched, ready to fight back, their eyes burning with new hope. But some hung back, muttering about the white men's revenge, their fear heavy in the silence. Chayton's chest tightened, feeling both pride and worry, as the torchlight flickered on their faces. When the meeting ended, people left in groups, some loud with rage, others quiet with doubt, and Chayton stood alone, carrying the weight of their trust like a stone. The night exploded with the sound of horses charging into the Cheyenne camp, Eddie leading his gang like a dark storm. Torches flared in their hands, lighting up their cruel grins as they yelled, wild and fierce. Chayton ran from his tent, his breath fast, grabbing a rifle as flames shot up, eating a teepee alive. He aimed into the chaos, firing a shot that echoed, his hands sweaty and shaking. Eddie laughed, a chilling sound, tossing another torch that set the grass ablaze, the fire roaring louder than the screams. Women and children ran, their cries sharp and desperate, while Chayton dodged smoke, his eyes watering, shooting again to protect his people. Bodies hit the ground, blood soaking the dirt, and Eddie's men kept coming, the night turning into a blazing hell Chayton couldn't stop. Chayton sat alone by the flickering fire in his cramped cabin, the wooden walls groaning as the wind screamed outside. The flames leaped and snapped, throwing shadows that danced across his tired face. He couldn't stop seeing the attack, the blazing teepees, the cries of his people, the sting of smoke in his eyes. Guilt crushed him heavy as a stone, making his chest ache with every breath. His hands tightened into fists, nails digging into his palms, as he stared into the fire's glow. Nearby, Lena and Sam watched him, worry etched into their faces. Lena's gentle eyes shimmered with understanding, her fingers fidgeting with a worn shawl, while Sam's hard stare burned with defiance, his shoulders squared. "You did what you had to," Lena said softly, her voice a warm thread in the cold night. Sam grunted. "We're Cheyenne. We fight." The fire cracked, spitting sparks, and Chayton exhaled shakily. Lena's hand brushed his arm, her touch light but steady, pulling him from the dark. He nodded slowly, their words sparking a faint strength inside him, though guilt still gnawed at his heart. Chayton trudged along a thin forest trail the next morning, his boots crunching brittle leaves underfoot. The air bit at his skin, crisp and cool, while tall pines whispered overhead, their needles rustling in the wind. He scanned the ground for the watcher's markers, small piles of stones, each one guiding him deeper into the woods. His pulse quickened, a mix of hope and dread twisting in his gut. At last, he found a cave, its mouth hidden by thick, scratchy vines that snagged his sleeves as he pushed through. Inside, the damp air smelled of dirt and moss, and his lantern's glow flickered on the rough walls. He ran his fingers over the cold stone, searching, until he found a dusty wooden box wedged in a crack. Inside were paper letters, maps, all scribbled with Gordon's name, proof he ran the illegal liquor trade. Chayton's breath hitched, his hands trembling as he read, the weight of the truth crashing over him like a wave breaking on the shore. Chayton galloped toward town, the documents stuffed tight in his saddlebag, dust swirling behind him. The sun blazed down, sweat beading on his forehead, but he pressed on, his horse's hooves pounding the dry earth. He reached a shabby office, its faded paint peeling, the door squeaking as he stepped inside. The federal agent sat there, his sharp eyes narrowing over a scratched desk, a pen tapping impatiently. Chayton spoke firmly, laying out the story, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. He handed over the papers, the rustle of them loud in the quiet room. The agent's face stayed stern, but he nodded, gruffly saying, "We'll investigate right away." Relief flooded Chayton, lightening his shoulders as he stepped outside into the golden sunset. Shadows stretched long across the street, and he breathed deep, hope flickering alive again. Mounting his horse, he murmured a quiet prayer, the words soft against the evening breeze, begging for justice to hold strong. In town, Gordon stormed back and forth in his office, boots thudding on the creaky floor. His face glowed red with rage, sweat gleaming on his brow as he crushed a note in his fist. The air reeked of old tobacco, thick and sour, choking the small space. He'd heard about the agent asking questions, and fury boiled in his veins. Chayton had done this. His eyes flashed, wild and dangerous, as he shouted at his men, voice cutting like a whip, "Find that agent!" "Silence him," he growled, his threat hanging heavy. Eddie smirked, his hand resting on his pistol, nodding with a glint of malice. That night, a scribbled message reached Chayton from a friend. The agent was gone, last seen near Gordon's land. Chayton's stomach dropped, his hand shaking as despair clawed at him. He stood in the dark, the wind cold against his face, hope crumbling like dry leaves underfoot, the fight now a deadly storm. Lena found Chayton by the river, its waters roaring past, loud and fierce. He sat with his head in his hands, shoulders slumped, the damp grass cool beneath him. She knelt close, her voice soft but strong, cutting through the rush of the current. "We can't stop now," she urged, her eyes bright with fire, searching his face. Chayton's voice cracked. "It's too dangerous. More will suffer." Lena grabbed his hand, her fingers warm and sure, grounding him. "If we don't fight, who will?" she pressed, her words fierce, alive with Cheyenne pride. She spoke of their strength, their spirit, her passion, a flame that warmed his cold fear. He looked up, meeting her steady gaze, seeing her unshaken resolve. "We'll face them at the town hall," she said, her plan bold and clear. His heart pounded, torn between terror and courage, but her strength pulled him in. He nodded, jaw tight, agreeing despite the risks, ready to stand with her against the storm ahead. The Cheyenne camp was alive with quiet energy as dusk settled over the plains. Chayton stood on a wooden crate, his hands gripping its edges, his voice firm as he spoke to the gathered crowd. Faces looked up at him, some lined with determination, others shadowed by fear of what might come. Lena sat cross-legged nearby, papers spread out before her, her brow furrowed as she sorted evidence under the glow of a lantern. Sam moved through the group, his boots kicking up dust, pointing at a map pinned to a tree, and whispering plans to a few young men. An old man with a braided beard nodded at Chayton, his eyes shining with pride, while a girl clutched her doll, peeking from behind her father. The air smelled of pine and smoke from a small fire, its flames dancing in the wind. Chayton's heart raced. He thought of Nita, weak but hopeful, and Lena, trusting him to lead. He squared his shoulders, ready to protect his people, their land, their future. The town hall buzzed with tension, its wooden walls lined with rows of benches packed tight. Chayton stood tall at the front, his voice ringing out as he held up a ledger, accusing Gordon and Dawson of their crimes. Lena pointed to a map beside him, her hand steady, tracing lines of the smuggling routes with a pencil. The crowd gasped, some whispered in shock, others glared at Gordon, who sat stiffly, his jaw tight. He leapt up, his face red, shouting, "Lies! All of it!" His polished boots thudded on the floor as he waved a hand to dismiss Chayton. Dawson fidgeted in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes flicking to the door. Voices rose in the roomager. Doubt, a woman yelling for proof. Chayton's stomach twisted, but he stared Gordon down, his anger burning hotter than his fear, knowing this was their one chance to win. Chaos ruled the town hall until the doors slammed open, silencing the crowd. A rugged man stepped in, his gray coat dusty, his face carved with deep lines. He held up a badge, his voice gravelly. "Agent Miles, ex-federal marshal." People froze, mouths open, as he marched forward, pulling photos and papers from a leather satchel. He slapped them on the table, proof of Gordon's smuggling, clear as day. Gordon's eyes widened, his hands shaking as he stammered denials. Dawson bolted for the exit, but Miles blocked him, his stance like iron. The crowd buzzed again, heads turning, whispers flying. Chayton felt a rush of hope, his chest tight with gratitude as federal agents stormed in, their badges glinting. Miles gave him a sharp nod, and Chayton knew the tide had turned. Their fight was won. The agents moved fast, cuffs clicking around Gordon's wrists as he cursed, his voice hoarse. Dawson slumped head down as they dragged him out, his fine coat wrinkled and dirty. The crowd erupted, some clapped, others stood silent, still processing the fall of the powerful men. Chayton, Lena, and Sam stood together, their shoulders touching, a quiet strength between them. An agent with a stern face shook Chayton's hand, saying, "Your land's safe now." Outside, the sky lightened, pink streaks painting the dawn, a hawk soaring free overhead. The Cheyenne people smiled, relief softening their faces, hands clasped in thanks. Chayton's thoughts drifted to Nita. He wished she could see this victory, feel this peace. The weight lifted, but his heart ached for her still. Chayton sat by Nita's bedside as she took her last breath, her hand cold in his. Tears fell as he whispered, "We won, Mama." The hospital room dim and silent. Lena rested a hand on his back, her own sobs quiet, her warmth his only comfort. Later, at the grave, the community camelders left flowers. A boy placed a stone, their faces soft with sorrow. The wind carried the scent of earth and grass across the safe Cheyenne land. Chayton stood with Lena on a hill, the sunset glowing red, her fingers laced with his. "We'll live for her," he said, voice thick but strong, her nod a promise. The vast plains stretched before them, peaceful, a new start born from pain and pride.